Let me have a go at starting. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week. Really sorry, because I think every point you make is really, to the point and relevant. And all I can say is yes, it needs to be better, and there needs to be better cross hybridization because there's an awful lot to learn. And there's no, I probably can't explain very well it's evolved the ways of long COVID therapies, except it's been a kind of learning to fly the airplane, learning to build the airplane as we fly process of mistakes and successes. And I think some things in long COVID research are going very well, and some things haven't, because a lot of it has been people muddling through and doing their best and sometimes making mistakes. And the other part that you brought up about why there's been underinvestment. Again, it's a kind of slightly miserable answer that there's underinvestment in most of the medical research that we need for most of the conditions that we need, and we fund a tiny fraction of what's needed, and that's to do with God knows fashion and randomness and all kinds of things. And the answer is yes. Maybe now we finally have the momentum to do better.
Martin, I wonder if it's something that you could talk about.
Yeah, look, this is an incredible. I really don't want to get into the details of the ME debate, because I'm, like many of us, I've followed the twists and turns, and it is a complex one. But I think the general point is that we do need to listen to those who are affected by conditions and to reiterate what was said already. And maybe just to expand, we'll get better research if we do that. And if I can just talk about a project we did a couple of years ago, where we were developing an intervention for managing hypertension in low-income communities in Malaysia and Colombia. We spent a year developing the intervention, working with communities to try to find out what was most appropriate. And when we then did a cluster randomized controlled trial, and it was very successful. But I think that we need to invest that work in co-production, co-creation, to develop things, to understand the nature of it. And a lot of the work that we do, trying to understand, in my case, understand hypertension and how it is perceived in terms of concepts of thickening of blood and all sorts of other things. I think listening to patients and finding out how they understand the condition, how frontline health professionals do, is just very, very important.
Caroline, thank you very much for that. I can see that Daniel would like to say something too. Daniel.
So, again, going to history, when the RRI was founded, it was founded because there was a feeling amongst some people from the Royal Society that science was being done not for what they call the common purposes of man. We'll ignore the gender piece there. But I do think it's really important that we are explaining science in terms that make sense to people who are involved. I really welcome the intervention, as I said at the beginning, from experts by experience and groups. And having a space like this, which is driven by public preoccupation, that allows people to be in dialogue. Alice and Aoife will know, in a high stakes context, the people who are most nervous when they present here perhaps are the scientists. And that's right. We should put ourselves out there and be held to account by people who have experience of the things that we're working on, and whether it's technology or medicine or science. We need to build spaces where a public voice can be heard. This is one. And I think the more that people who have expertise by experience can be part of the conversation, with real jeopardy for the scientists, the better.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And Caroline, thank you very much for joining us to ask that question. Oh, Stephen, you'd like to say something too, Professor Stephen Reicher.
I want to make a more general point, which is I think there are a number of different problems here, and I think it's important not to confound them. So I do think it's a huge problem to psychologize problems which are somatic. I think it's a huge problem to somaticize problems which are psychological. I think it's an even bigger problem to downplay things if they are psychological and say they're not real. And therefore, one of the things I think is immensely important, whether it's to do with COVID, long COVID, or anything else, is not to say the real problems, the physical and the psychological problems, aren't real or aren't important. It's to value mental well-being as much as physical well-being, to invest as much in psychological well-being as in physical well-being, and to take both as seriously as each other. I mean, I'm a psychologist. My wife is a clinical psychologist. She tells me I talk about it and she does something useful, and I'm sure she's probably right on that one. But for almost every Tuesday over the 40 years we've been psychologists, you hear a government minister saying, well, we must take mental health more seriously and we must invest more in it. And it never, ever happens. And one of the things I hope that comes out of this pandemic is that we recognize the importance of mental health, of taking it just as seriously, of investing in it, and in terms of public health, embedding structures to support mental health in institutions, in our schools, in our communities, in our workplaces, and so on. And so I think absolutely we've got to take all these problems seriously, but let's not create this hierarchy whereby physical counts and psychological doesn't.